Chained to your core, will you be free? Hey, composing gloves here, and today, we will be covering basic compression in the master band. Why are you covering basic compression, Mr. Gloves? Well, first, I'm expecting you still to know what compression is, but we're going to be talking about how to do it in Maximus because it is a very different deal. I want you to know basic because that's like going to be useful in so many plugins and as a general concept, because you need to know how it's typically applied in order to appreciate how Maximus applies it. And also when I say things that are different, you'll actually know what I'm talking about. So you should really understand basic compression first. Now, I've let you think two things, and I'm about to rectify those two things. So first thing I've let you think, for the sake of just making learning easier, is that when I play sound, that this representation right here, this shading showing, I've called that the volume, is certainly not the volume. That's actually your compression. That is the compressor activating and deactivating. So if I turn on my analyzer here to show me what the compressor is doing, you'll notice that its default position is down. So that means that when it's up, it is activating. So it's seeing things. Now it's this line. There's a disconnect though between this and this. So it's kind of weird. And then one reason I'll be talking theoretically about some of this stuff and not really relying on the line except for general indicators, because it's just too crazy to try and think about how this relates to this sometimes. So what this is saying is basically, you can see that it's mirroring our envelope, which is reflecting what this is doing. It's not reflecting what the curve is doing. So if I were to put a curve in here like this, it doesn't care what this curve is. It's going to continue to read it like this. And so because this shape is the same for what it's detecting, and this only changes by the attack and release setting. It does not change by this setting. So that's one thing I've let you think, and it's honestly, it gets a little, it's like, oh my gosh, yeah. So anyways, the point is that this curve is unrelated to this setting, this scope, and that this scope is representing what this is doing. Okay, so it's not technically your volume. Watch this. If I were to turn my sustain all the way up, it becomes a flat line and I receive this. It's basically saying volume is here. If that was volume, that's what it would be doing, but it's clearly not volume. It's the compression envelope because of what's going on here. So this is if we had an envelope here, some sort of remapping, this line would tell us how that remapping is being applied. So I've said it the other way though, because as you could see just by thinking about it, that is like, it will give you a headache. And especially when I was going over the transient shaping capabilities, you could set this up to basically behave like your audio, which allows you to dynamically remap it using the shape here. So that's one reason why things behave the way they did. That an element that I did not explain because it is a very sort of dense element to understand. So hopefully you get it, that the two differences. The main one is, okay, I'm done talking about that now. So if you didn't get it, just go back, rewatch it a couple times, and eventually it'll click, hopefully. So the other thing that I have let you think is that this low, mid, high delay is the pre-delay. It is not the pre-delay, and if you come in here and try to use the master band as your master band, like a one-band compressor, you will be very surprised when you touch the attack knob. So I'm going to turn off some of these displays here, except for the green and the purple. Now you would expect the green and the purple to be perfectly in sync, right? But if we turn our attack knob all the way down, guess what? They will be. Now, if we were to set a compression envelope, and this gives me a chance to sort of reiterate what I just said, this shape is not related to the compression, what's going on here. It's not related to this. Why is it not related to that? Because this is how the compression envelope is activated inside this envelope. They're two separate things. So when I turn my attack time down, it's going to bring this up and down in time regardless of what shape I have in here. It will always respond because of this to my transients. This is the pre-delay, the attack knob. So a typical attack knob, you turn it up, you would expect it to let the first transient through and then let subsequent transients through, getting softer each time depending on your release setting, right? Now, but we just discovered that there's a disconnect between this and the actual shape we have in here. The actual shape we have in here is telling us how to remap the amplitude. These controls tell us when the amplitude comes in, how to apply that amplitude to this shape. So, okay, here's my example, right? This attack time says how quickly the amplitude can come in here. With it all the way down, amplitude can come in immediately. And we can effectively look at this as a volume control, granted that our sustain and release are at their proper settings. So if I turn my release all the way down, we'll get some distortion, but it will perfectly mirror what's going on with our input signal. So we could effectively look at this like a volume control. We might want to release a little smoother and not as perfect, because then we'll get distortion. We'll talk about the distortion here in a second. So basically, if you turn your attack way up though, what it's going to do is it's going to say, delay the audio. This is your pre-delay for your master band. Delay the audio and apply this shape here perfectly every single time. It's not gonna do like the attack will on a normal compressor that would go boom, 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 boom. Like if you had a long attack, it would say let the first ones through and get softer gradually, sort of for like a really natural feel of compression. Here, not so. That's not what happens. As you can see, our volume comes in and then it's delayed heavily. Here's our input, here's our output, because this is our pre-delay. So that's a really long way of saying it, but I'm trying to say it with all the details you need and all the extra information to sort of grasp what's going on here, because it's a very complicated process, to be real. So, or just to understand how to even apply it. So the better you understand that, the more you can apply it. So that's the attack knob's a pre-delay, so it doesn't behave that way. Now let's talk about, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about these controls specifically. Now let's go over to our high band, and what we want to do essentially is this shows us that these controls are applied very differently when we want to use Maximus for compression. One reason why I like using it for sonic changes rather than compression is that that's pretty darn complicated. It's made to be a multi-band compressor, because if you were to apply an attack setting, all that would do is you could make an insane shape, right? And you'd want this as shape to be applied over time. But with Maximus, this attack setting, all it does is change how quickly that shape can be applied to the transient. So all you'd come out here, because originally you would want it to come out, let the transients through, and then slowly squash the transients. Not so here. The attack setting would just tell you like how perfectly it will squash those transients, basically. It will come out just as soft. Now, let me give you the counter example, I guess, and then we'll move on to that. So these settings, though, because this is the low, mid, high delay, so this knob right here is the pre-delay for these guys, and that means that these guys' attack knobs behave the way we would think they would. They'll behave the way normal compressors will. So it's truly optimized to be a multi-band compression unit, having taken care of your compression here and not in the master band. So, and that way it's kind of counterintuitive. I'd much rather have a separate knob for pre-delay and have a regular attack knob than what we have here. Like this is like sort of limiting in some ways. So that's why you would pull out Fruity Limiter or Fruity Compressor versus Maximus to do something. Now, let's set up a regular compressor so you can understand what I was talking about earlier. Maybe you are really shaky on compression. So first, I'm going to turn off my mid and low bands, because I want a single band compressor. I'll even turn off my high band, my master band, because they each have their own out, so it's going to be fine. Next, I'm going to go to my high band. I'm going to go to bands, and I'm going to set it up so that it controls the entire spectrum. I can't get down here. So that might be an issue, which is another reason why you'd pull out another compressor to do this anyways. We could see here that as I play my audio, oh, my bad. Do I have a, I do not understand why it is so loud. I have missed a setting somewhere. Oh, you know what? Was I compressing things earlier? I don't even know. It shouldn't be that loud though. Pre and post input. Did I reset something here? Oh, the volume went way up. I don't know what caused that. I must have pushed some secret hotkey or something. That was weird. Okay, so what we're going to do is the high band now contains our frequencies. You see they're coming in. Now the display stopped working because I turned our master band off. It's just a weird thing it does. I don't know why you can have the master band off, but then it turns the display off. Like, I don't get that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just turn the compression off. So the master band just passes the audio so we can see our compressor working. So Just so you know, that's a thing. But I just want to demonstrate this could be off. So now we've got all our signal coming through the high band, right? Granted, that little chunk of low end that we are incapable of getting. And so what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how a typical compressor would do this. So I'm going to turn it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply compression at this point, a very severe compression like that. Okay, so that's going to be the compression envelope that we have. Now, as the compression, what we've talked about is that this purple line represents what these knobs here are doing, not what, this is not volume, this is the compression envelope. So what I'm going to do is turn my attack way up, and my release, I'm going to turn my release way up too. And I'll explain why in just a sec. So as I play it, now the audio that basically what it's going to say is it's going to take a little bit for it to realize that audio has gone past my threshold, which I've set right here. So audio has gone past here. It's going to take a little bit for it to realize what's gone on, and it's going to start dialing it back till it reaches this defined area. So as you see, it turns it down. It let the first one almost through completely. Like it got taken completely by surprise. If I turn my attack way up though, it immediately starts soft again. So you might be having some disconnects right now, which is why I've relied on you studying the other compression videos. But let's talk about this sort of in a more controlled sense, specifically within the features of Maximus. So one reason why I don't like using this purple line is that it does not really show you that process in the purple line. It said, so this is your compression envelope, but it doesn't show the compression going down further and further and further. It shows, something else. It shows you it's just confusing to look at. So it's easier to just look at your output and say, oh, look at that's what the attack is doing. So it's easier to just look at that. Don't rely on the purple line for accurate information about this in that sense. So you see it's turning down and turning down and turning down. One reason why it's like that is because the off position is at the bottom. So this is technically more on. So it's more on. It's like inverted. That's why I don't like looking at that. This is much more straightforward. So as I play it, maybe you think it's not, but whatever. So as I play it, you see it do its thing. So if I turn my attack way up, it'll let the first one through. And you need to apply a compression setting. These controls only dictate how the compressor behaves according to the envelope that you set. This is the genius of how powerful Maximus is. A lot of compressors will have stuff called hard knee, soft knee, stuff like that. A hard knee is when you let it hit a level and then it can't go past that level. It's very hard. Maybe it can go past that level, maybe just a smidge, but it's very, very sort of tough. It has maybe an envelope like that, where it will let open more as you get closer to the top. Maybe it's got what's called a soft knee, meaning it can reach the level you've set, but it will slowly turn the volume down. So as they get louder, they will progressively get softer. So there's all these different envelopes you can have, and compressors typically will just do this on its own. Sometimes they'll have even dynamic ways of treating these, where as it gets louder, it will do something like this. So it'll do like that. And then maybe it'll do, let's say if this is your threshold, it will do something like that. They'll have different envelopes. It's part of the reason why some compressors sound the way they are. And sometimes they even vary. So that's something you can't do in Maximus. You can't make variations. It would be so cool if you could have a line that moves up and down just a smidge, so you could get variable compression at different moments in your compression envelope to affect your volume. That would be so cool. There are compressors that do that. Like I believe the Vary compressor by Native Instruments, I believe that's one of the concepts in it because it's got the word vary in it. I haven't read the manual on it though, so I'd have to go look it up. But there are compressors that are designed to do that. Old analog compressors did stuff like that because it had non-linearities, meaning as stuff went through the different parts, they would treat the audio slightly differently. Really small stuff, but that gave it a flavor, a particular kind of sonic quality. So that's what that does. Now let's talk. So that's what the attack knob does. So attack knob up says as soon as audio comes in, it says bang, I'm attacking you. Attack knob all the way, or that's up to me. Okay, attack knob all the way long attack time says it's sort of a lazy attack knob. It's as if you have a little guy pushing a fader up and down and he says, oh, audio came through, and then I'll turn the volume down, and then oh, it's not there anymore. And so we're talking about just the attack guy. So when audio comes through, he's going to turn it down. If he's maybe had a coffee or caffeine or a Red Bull or something, he's going to be boom, boom, boom. So this is caffeine guy. This is like the relaxed dude that's maybe had some like drugs or something, relaxant drugs. He's been to a pharmacy. I don't know. So what's going on here is the release setting. Now the release setting, there are two guys in charge of this knob. It's not just one guy. There's got to be two. One is the guy in charge of turning it down. Then another guy, his job is to turn it up. And so if you have a really fast release time and a really fast attack time, you can imagine if they're both freaking on Red Bull or Monster or whatever, they're going to be like down, and then the other guy's going to go up, down, up, down, up, down, down, up. And you can imagine it'd probably be like a fight. Well, it doesn't sound that pleasant when you apply it. So let's try applying that. Oh, you hear that? That's distortion. That is because it's turning down and fast at a cycle rate, literally adding content to your signal. It's turning the volume up and down so fast it's become audible as a frequency. So what you want to do, not a frequency, it's just become audible distortion. So what you want to do is not have a wicked fast attack and wicked fast release time. You want to have them lengthened out. And this is very well represented here. Whenever you have something like this, that's pretty clear there's probably distortion in your signal. If you're unsure, sometimes it helps to listen to it and then to dial it back. And now if you listen, you can hear there's distortion there and you can pick it out way easier. Like, oh yeah, that's distorting. Now this only applies when you have your settings and your compression envelope is active. So I just want to keep reiterating that. I really want it to be in your head. Next thing up is we have the sustain knob. The sustain knob controls how long it will sustain while the envelope has been activated. So one thing about this release knob, we got to talk about one other thing about this release knob before we can really get to the sustain knob. And you notice that there's two release knobs. I believe actually in the manual they're called relative knobs, but I just call them release because they've got REL. And these behave how the release knob releases audio. So when a release happens, so let's go back to our guy with the fader. He might turn down the volume. Well, if you've got a lazy fader guy, your audio could drop below your threshold. Let's say it was like this. So this stuff should be uncompressed theoretically, right? Well, your guy that turned the volume down, he might be like really fast, like wham. But then your release guy, maybe he's like really relaxed today. He just woke up in the morning being asked to sing in some choir. Like he's not feeling it today, man. So he's going to take his time turning that knob back up. So that means if audio drops back below here, the guy who did the fast attack is going to stay quiet. So quiet stuff will now be quieter than it originally was. And this guy will turn it back up over time. So basically what this means is if you have, I'm going to say it one more time just because I feel like it'll help. If you have audio, it drops down here. The audio reduction applied to it from the attack, like let's say it will reduce it by this much, right? That same reduction that happens here, it's as if this line got lowered to here for your release. It got lowered so it's not necessarily not audible, but it's been lowered. And so it's as if it goes down, and then as the release guy turns his volume back up, he's moving this back up. It's like your threshold is moving almost. Well, that's pretty much what's happening. So that's what the release is all about. Now, there are different ways to have this control happen. So I'm going to put the sustain off a little bit longer. There are, as you can see here, we have these different curve settings. These curves, so you see we have a curve like this. Well, you can have it, I'll just show you. So we'll have a nice smooth attack. And I'm going to turn my sustain up a little bit just to make it more clear. Now you can see, now I like this one because it shows the reduction. Reduce. So it's like compressing. So it's a little more straightforward in that way. Show band gain envelope, turning the volume down versus this one that's like the opposite. So I don't know why I didn't say that earlier. So as we do this, we'll see it doing its thing. Now if I change my curve setting, now you got to have the curve on. So I can apply a curve. This curve will apply to my attack. And so right now my attack is sort of this downward, sort of really fast motion. Let's make my attack a little fast, a little like that. So now it's smoothing out. You can see it takes time for it to turn on. As I turn my relative on, I can influence how this curve is behaving. So you can see I've changed the curve shape, and I can do this by switching to different curves. I believe they get steeper as we go here. 8's the steepest, I believe, and then 1 is the least steep. And then by using relative, you can change how long, you add like a gap in here on how long it takes to turn it on. So I'll let you experiment with this on your own. Essentially, when you're setting a compressor, you want to find a moment that jives with your song. So this will create pumping. So because you can see it stays down for a little bit and then it turns the volume back up. So we create this intermittent motion before we get to our, because now we have a fast attack, it stays down, and then it rises back up before, and this is our delay, our release. Our release is now switched directions, is what's happened here. With it off, our release goes like that. It's like pulling up, but in this one, it's like ramping up. Instead, it's a different shape. And this can be influenced by our release curve, which is influenced here. In the manual, they have like exact pictures on what's going on. So let's say we have a really fast release with a slow attack. And the relative will just simply change the way these curves are interpreted. So I guess I can explain it pretty okay. One will pull up. It'll be an accelerating curve. I believe that's with relative off. And then the other one will pull down, a decelerating curve. I believe I had that backwards. Anyways, one pulls up, one pulls down. You can set this to control that. That's basically the moral of the story. So you can be really specific with the way these interact. Okay, so that's that. We've gone through, so hopefully you're still with me. Next, we're going to do sustain. Sustain, what the sustain controls, and I'm leaving just this the same because it's just a good example. We have gain reduction, all that jazz. So I'm going to turn my attack up and my release to the middle so it'll compress stuff. As you can see before, it was letting through part of my audio. So that's one way when people talk about preserving transients, that's what they're referring to. They don't want to affect their first transient. And so they'll want the attack to turn off in this gap here so that when it attacks again, the transient will still get through and you'll maintain the original sonic integrity of that drum hit. It gets really hard though if you have continual audio streams where the art of compression really is an art. Like you've recorded a drum kit, you've got bleed from the hi-hat and the snare, but you are trying to isolate your kick. So there's a number of ways people will they'll go to pretty extreme lengths to get just that kick so that they can influence it without changing, its transient. Or they might use a transient shaper, but then you have all these other things going on beneath it. So there's all these methods to sort of solo and single things out so you can affect just them to make them sit in your mix better. So those are these controls, and I told you this is going to be kind of hefty, but hopefully you're getting it. Next up we have sustain. Sustain says how long it will maintain a particular value. So once it hits our attack and it's reached the point we want it at, how long will it stay there before it releases? If we turn it way up, it will stay there forever. And our release will come only after the audio is stopped for a good chunk of time. It even says up here, so 1 second again, 1,000 milliseconds. So we could set it. And what this is great for is if you want a fast attack and a fast release, but you want to fix up, you'll get these weird square motions. So you can come up with really creative ways to use this. But it's a great way to smooth things out, to avoid that distortion. So that's what this is really good for. Now you'll notice sustain has two values. It's got peak and RMS. Peak and RMS, I believe I cover RMS in my digital audio basics, but basically peak is as soon as something happens. RMS stands for root mean square, and it is talking about, this is the way we hear, we average loud parts. So transients sound really particular, as we talked about in previous videos, because they are so fast and they have such uniqueness to them. But when you turn the volume up, we don't perceive additional volume because our ears cannot move that violently, that quickly. So like they cannot, like the eardrum cannot go wham, wham, wham like that fast. Like it's an amplitude thing. It's not really a frequency thing. And so as a result, we average volumes. RMS does this for us. So we can use RMS, and this is really good for compression because if our compressor is driven by RMS, this means that if we look here, our meters will actually change too. So we change here, that's our peak, this is our RMS. I mean, this is our peak. So you see it goes all the way up here. RMS only goes to up here. This is the perceived loudness. So if you want to influence the loudness of how something is and not change its sonic quality, you want to use RMS and use that as a judge for your compression, which is really wise. But you want to be wary of what you're doing to your peaks while you're doing that, because you're changing the quality now mostly based on perceived loudness rather than preserving transient. So there's like give and go as we go here. So this low, mid, high delay, all that is that's the delay that these bands cause for the look ahead so that they can deal with transients, because if it reacts to a transient after the transient's gotten there, it will therefore always leave a little bit of the transient left. There'll always be a little spike at the beginning. So we'll put a little delay on it like we have here, and that will allow it to see the audio before it processes it, allowing it to perfectly squash the transient or do whatever it is you want to do to your transient. This can be very undesirable sometimes though, so something you want to be aware of. However, you can deal with it here with a delay with your attack settings separate, which is why didn't they do that here? Why don't they? Look at, we have room now. They could just resize it. I suppose in their smallest, they still have room. They could have done it. I don't know why they didn't do it. That's if they could add a feature, that would probably be one of the features that would be near the top of my list. Add another delay so the attack behaves the way you think it will. So now all these other settings apply the same except for the attack knob on the master, because that's like a dual edged sword right there. You can't not squash the transient. It's weird. So, but it still, I believe it still functions as an attack knob. I try to just avoid this because of of how weird it is. Next up, we have the low, mid, high mix. So this allows you to do parallel compression. I'm not going to be like covering parallel compression or anything. This video is dense enough already. But essentially, if you have it all the way to the left, this means that it's 100% dry. So the audio is not being affected by Maximus. If you have it in the middle, the audio, and I believe these are global. Yeah, these are global. So it doesn't matter what band you're on. These will change per band. But these controls over here are global bands. So it doesn't matter what band you're on, it affects it globally. In the middle, you can do parallel compression. So you can mix the audio that's dry with the audio that's coming in via Maximus. However, you may consider doing bus compression because you just get a lot more control with what you do to those extra signals. Maybe you want to add reverb differently, or maybe run it through multiple compressors or anything, give it a little bit of an extra touch than just general mix. But you can do that here. So it's very convenient. And then the most common setting is the default one, where it's just the output from Maximus. So you're compressing the audio separately. So that is that. If you have any questions about this, let me know. I realize I covered an awful lot. Let's really quick look at the attack setting on the master band, because I didn't really cover it super in detail. But as we saw, there's a delay that gets applied. So let's turn our compression on. But as we do this, yeah, it behaves the same. We need to apply a compression envelope though, so let's do that. Let's make it a severe one. So we could see how the attack is acting here, and then if you turn your attack up, you can see it changes. So the attack knob does influence this, but again, I avoid this. So that's just, if you just really wanted to know, you could do an experiment like we just did and find out what it's doing. So you can, but it does influence that delay. So it will always behave on the transient. And so as you can see, it started acting like before you even got to the transient on that one. Here, it like perfectly nails it. So, it's completely up to you. I wonder if you turn this off. Nope. The master band is separate. So, yes, that's that. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe. Support me on Patreon because you're really cool. And have a blessed day. This is going to bring out my upper end right here for sure.